You're listening to The Stall and Stable Show, ideas for happy horsekeeping.
So who's coming to visit us and who to? Better yet, who wants to be neighbors? In this episode, I chat with Aiken real estate expert Barb Gould-Uskup about what the market is like for horse properties in South Carolina. Get the scoop, get some advice, and get shopping. Listen in. This is episode 116 of the Stall and Stable Show, brought to you by American Stalls, makers of fine quality stall components and accessories. If you really want to know about American Stalls and what they have that's new and exciting, listen to episode 115. I had a great conversation with the CEO, Yash Balasaria. But if you can't do that, because you're busy listening to this episode, just visit them online at americanstalls.com. Welcome back, listeners. Today is Wednesday, May 10th, but this episode was recorded on Wednesday, May 3rd. Please support our show by spending some time on our sponsors' websites and getting to know them. In addition to American Stalls, I am grateful for the support of Barn Pros, shipping their incredible equestrian home and barn kits nationwide. You can find them online at barnpros.com. My guest today is Barb Gould-Uskup. She's a pro realtor with Carolina Real Estate Company, and she specializes in horse properties. Barb helped Buck and I find who to, and she did it in pretty short order. She was efficient, she was pleasant to work with, and she handled my very particular requests and style with professionalism and grace. And she's got some high standards. She's really good at what she does. So I'm happy to have her on the show today to share the inside scoop and some of the advice that she shared with me, which made our real estate experience in Aiken so wonderful. So without further ado, let's welcome Barb to the show. Hi, Barb. Welcome to Stall and Stable.
Hey, Helena. How are you?
I'm great because I'm a new farm owner, thanks to you.
Well, it was my pleasure to work with y'all. I'm so glad we found you the perfect property for your needs.
My experience with you was terrific, and that's not always the case when buying and selling real estate, especially if you're a horse person, because we can be very particular. But before we start talking about the process and my farm and all of that, tell our listeners about you. Were you born and raised in Aiken, or did you land there from some other planet like me?
No, ma'am, I was not born and raised here, and what brought me to Aiken was polo. About 21 years ago, my ex-husband and I were in Florida, and we met several different people that played in Aiken and lived in Aiken, and one of them, Omar Cepeda, invited me to play in a tournament, and then another mutual friend of Tom's and mine invited us, and his name is John Gobin, and John asked Tom, who was then a 3-goal player, to be on one of his teams and invited me to play with him in the 8-goal. So that's kind of what initially brought us to Aiken, and I took one foot in this town and said, I want to move here. And that was that. There's no place better in Aiken in the world for horses. I mean, it's a wonderful place.
Horse person to horse person, what do you love most about living in Aiken?
Well, what I love most about living in Aiken, there isn't any one thing. Honestly, Helene, there's so much to love. It's too hard to put into one thing. But some of the things I love most about Aiken are that it's the one unique place in the world where every single horse discipline seems to play nice in the same sandbox. Everybody gets along. Doesn't matter whether you fox hunt, you do Western competitions like breakaway roping or cutting or team penning, or you do the highest level of the jumpers at Bruce's Field at the Spring Classics, or you do 3-day eventing, or you just love to trail ride our 2,200 square miles of trails in the Hitchcock Woods. It's just insane what we have available to us here. And how everybody, because we have the commonality of all being horse lovers, it's a lifestyle and everyone appreciates it. So we all play nice together.
You know, I've never heard that before, that perspective. And I don't think I've experienced it anywhere else. A friend said to me recently, when they're in Aiken, they're in their happy place. And because there's just so many horse things to do there. and so many resources and so many like-minded people that you don't have the same frustrations, tensions, or insecurities that you might find elsewhere. Because everyone's needs are met. The horses' needs are met. The people's needs are met. And I'd venture to guess that that contributes significantly to the fact that people get along.
Well, that's quite true. And also, too, we have tremendous resources here. That's another nice aspect of being in Aiken is we do have multiple good veterinary clinics. We're very close to University of Georgia. If God forbid your horse needs a major surgery, has a major issue. We also are relatively close to NC State. So, and even Auburn, I mean, we have so many facilities, so much available to us. We have multiple feed stores. We have wonderful local products that are made here just for horses. We even have a feed manufacturing mill right here in the center of town. And there's nothing like feeding your horse feed that's made with local ingredients that's fresh. In fact, they even offer an organic feed if you really want to be true to the land or true to organics. You can feed organic chicken feed. You can feed organic horse feed. It's amazing what you can find here.
It really is nirvana. I can't wait to be there for more than 7 days at a time.
Well, we can't wait to have you here.
So let's talk about real estate. What typically makes up the bulk of your closings? Is it horse properties, regular residential properties, something else, commercial properties? What does your portfolio look like?
Well, I don't think there is such a thing as a regular home in Aiken. We have so many unique and different things that go on here. I would say that the majority of my clients are horse people, whether they're buying a residence and boarding their horse or whether they're buying a horse property. My closings are all for the most part, with horse people. I don't get too many golfers unless they happen to be married to a horse person. So that's pretty much my situation. I would say I probably sell more farms or homes with acreage than I do homes that are located in town. That said, a lot of my clients will buy a farm and then also buy a home in town so that they can have their horses and their help living out at the farm. They might have a little apartment for themselves out there. And then they also have a nice house in town. So, you know, I've closed down both. There's really no way to quantify it, honestly, Helene. I wish I could.
In my experience buying and selling homes, not that it's extensive, I find that I'm a very different person when I am the buyer versus when I'm the seller.
You're not unique.
Right?
You're not unique.
So when I'm the seller, I can be emotionally detached from the whole process. It's all business. But as a buyer, that's a whole nother story. And one of the things I really appreciated about working with you was how calm and level-headed you were about the entire roller coaster ride. Do buyers and sellers tend to fit into emotional categories, or is everybody different?
Well, I think everybody's a little different when they're a seller than they are a buyer. I don't think it's all about emotion for many people. You know, some people it is, some people it's not. I think more when you're a seller, it's hard because you do have some emotion tied up. This is where you've spent your time. And let's face it, the majority of people in this world, when they buy a farm or a home or a residence, it's one of the largest single purchases they'll make in their life, you know, where they're going to have their heart. Home is where the heart is. So whether your home is on a farm or your home is in a house in town, it's hard to give that up, regardless of whether you want to or not, unless it's just circumstantial. Like, for example, I just sold a property that I owned in town, and it was bought as an investment property. But even then, there was a little emotion involved because I had put 10 years of hard work into running this rental property and improving it. And I was delighted when the person that bought it, who's also, by the way, a horse person, she bought it for herself to have as a pied-à-terre and then also to use as an Airbnb. So it was really kind of nice to be in those seller's shoes again and feel that. But, you know, it was even a little emotional there. So I think the emotion plays in. And also, too, when one is a seller, one's looking to try to maximize the value in their property. Some of it comes from emotion and some of it's just financial. But by the same token, it's always going to be different for you when you're a buyer and a seller. As a seller, you so want to get your money out of your property and you want it to go to a good home, and you also have some feelings and emotions tied up in it. As a buyer, you want what you want. You get very, very excited, but it's part of my job to kind of point out when you get excited about a property, the good things that you're getting excited about, but also caution you if you're getting overly excited about something that may not materialize the way that you plan. One of the difficulties that I have as a buyer's agent is that so many of my people buy properties that they want to make changes to. And there's two ways to look at it when you make a change to a property. Hopefully you'll get your money back out, but that's not always the case. Not every improvement that we make with horse farms and horse properties is going to truly add dollar for dollar value. Whereas if you're doing something like remodeling a kitchen or a bathroom, you're going to see a pretty strong ROI on that. When you're adding a barn or paddocks or anything of that nature, you're not going to see that same return on investment. But what you do get out of it is something called lifestyle equity. You're able to live the life that you want. And that's how you have to look at horse farms and horse property improvements much of the time. It's lifestyle equity.
I'm so glad that there's a phrase for it, lifestyle equity. I talk about energy all the time. There are things and situations that create energy and those that deplete your energy. And that happens in spaces too. So when you find something that makes you happy, when you find a space or a place that makes you happy, that lifestyle equity is an energy generator. And that energy will carry over into other areas of your life, creating a balance that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yep. Well, and that's what you have to look at it as. Let's face it. When you put up a barn, you can build the barn hall, or you can put up a running shed and call it your barn. But at the end of the day, if the horse has shelter, it's really all in what makes you happy and what makes you happy for your horse or your horses.
And for a horse person, that's everything.
Absolutely, because as horse people, if our horses are happy, we're happy.
No truer words have ever been spoken. Somebody asked me the other day if owning 11 acres, which is more land than I've ever had in my life, was going to be overwhelming. And I did think about it for a minute, and I thought, no, because that much space means my horses are going to be happier. Their needs will be met, which means my stress level is going to drop. It's a little counterintuitive to think that more land won't be more responsibility, but my instincts tell me that the net change will be less stress. Now, there could be plenty of other things that will introduce stress to my life, things I haven't anticipated yet, but on the horse side, I think it's going to be less stress.
It's as long as it makes you happy, as long as you're building lifestyle equity, then it should make you happy. Plus, in South Carolina, as you learned when you were going through your buying process, that 11 acres qualifies you for the agricultural exemption, which lowers your property taxes, which creates financial happiness.
Yeah.
Because you're not shelling out as much for the privilege of having a horse farm.
Okay, I want to go back to talking about sellers for a minute. As a buyer, like most buyers, I'm going to guess, I start my property search online. And something I find particularly challenging and frustrating is the way some properties are presented visually online. Meaning, all we have to go by are photographs at first. And what I see more often than not are photos of homes or residences or farms that have not been tidied up. Barns aren't clean, there's shavings in the aisleway, stalls aren't cleaned. Or inside the house, the seller has so many personal items on display, it's kind of off-putting because their stuff is distracting me from envisioning this place as my own. What kind of advice do you give your sellers about how to best prep their property for sale?
Well, my number one piece of advice to my sellers is declutter, declutter, declutter. Get rid of the garbage that's on your property. We all accumulate old fence boards. We all accumulate stuff. One of the beauties of horses and horse farms is that we have all this neat stuff that we accumulate, but we have to really be serious and honest with ourselves when we're looking to sell our farm in terms of saying, okay, of this stuff that I have, what is truly going to be of value to me when I move to my next farm or to the person that purchases my farm? In other words, like the experience that you went through when purchasing your farm, we had to go in there. If you recall, Jack and I went in there and took all the old fence boards and the garbage off the property that had just sort of accumulated because as we live in a place, we just sort of say, okay, well, we'll just put it over in this corner and we'll deal with it later. Don't wait till later. Deal with it before we start taking photographs. deal with it before we start showing your property. That's thing number one. Thing number two is you have to be realistic with yourself about depersonalizing. It's okay to have some personal items that you utilize on a daily basis. But if you haven't touched it, seen it, smelt it, dealt it in the last 2 years, pack it up if you're going to take it with you, or declutter and get rid of it, donate it, give it to someone who will use it. Those things are so important. Other things for sellers to recognize are that buyers have a really hard time focusing if there's animals everywhere making noise, like dogs that are left in crates in the house, or any sort of miscellaneous things that are left about for caring for the animals. Like, pick up stuff, put it away. If you have dog beds everywhere, yes, your dogs need their dog beds. Nobody's arguing, but shove them under your bed or pick them up and put them somewhere where they're not blocking the pathways through the house or the barn, and they're not being distractions when people are looking at photographs. We all love dogs. We all love our animals besides our horses, but we've got to be realistic about knowing that not every single person that has horses has 20 dogs. They don't all have a big farm quite yet. So just be mindful of those types of things.
And you don't want to be moving into somebody else's house. I mean, technically, yeah, we're moving into somebody else's house, but you need to be able to envision the place as yours before you make the leap to buy it.
I always tell people light, bright, and off-white, and clean. Oftentimes what happens is, people get into a lifestyle and they forget to clean their homes. We as equestrians tend to keep a tidy barn, yet our house is not always so much. I think we need to be mindful when we put our properties on the market that we have to keep things not only decluttered, but also clean. And it is a pain in the butt, and it's sometimes inconvenient, but if you keep up with it, it's not as bad. And it's worthwhile to hire a good deep cleaning service to come in and clean everything and freshen everything, and then just makes it easier for you to keep it up. But those are basically the things that count. Keeping stuff such that when people come in, they can look at this as a blank slate under which they can paint their own picture.
So the real estate market at the moment is pretty wonky. That's my technical term. It's all over the place, and some people feel confident that they know where it's going, but I don't. Maybe you do. You're the professional. What is inventory like in Aiken right now, either in Aiken itself or in Aiken County or even in South Carolina? How would you describe the current state of the market there? And what changes do you think may be on the horizon?
Well, what we're seeing in general is we are still one of the states, the entire state of South Carolina, we are one of those states where people are still wanting to move here. So our new construction starts are still pretty good. We're seeing a little more inventory in existing homes come on the market. The horse property segment, though, we are still as dry as a bone for inventory. If anything good comes on the market, a buyer has to be prepared to act instantly. For example, I sold a property about a month ago. I put it on the market in the beginning of April, I guess beginning to mid-April, I put it on the market. It was under contract in 3 hours.
Holy cow.
Not 3 days, 3 hours after hitting the MLS, I had a contract on it. And it was a very generous offer, very few contingencies, very straightforward, easy peasy. It was for 78 acres. And now this was nothing special. It was an old ranch house, solid brick ranch, that was in really dilapidated condition, but it was the 78 acres, and the fact you had a solid brick structure that you could work on and make into something special, 3 hours, and closed in 3 weeks.
I know that kind of thing has been trending over the last year or two after the pandemic, but it still blows my mind. I'll never get used to that. But it does beg the question, what can buyers do to be prepared to shop, to buy in this kind of market?
The very, very first thing I would do if I were a buyer is have my financing in order. Have a pre-approval letter from a bank or a lender, but I don't care who you're getting your loan from, have a pre-approval letter available. If you can pay cash or put down a big down payment, do it. If you own property and you need to sell in order to buy, list it immediately. Because if it's not listed and you don't have your financials in order, you're never going to win on buying a farm.
So it's still a race.
It's a race. It's definitely a race. And it's going to be a race here for the foreseeable future for existing homes, for, that type of inventory. For inventory like land, it's not as bad, but even with good parcels of land, it's becoming the same way. I recently had a transaction. It was in February, and my clients put in an offer on a piece of land. It was a good offer, but it wasn't full price. And even though it was cash, it had some contingencies that what the seller felt were a bit restrictive. So guess what? We lost. We did not get the property. And I'd advise my clients to be a little bit more mindful in terms of listening to their agent with the experience. I'm not a professional well driller. I'm not a professional septic installer. But what I can tell you is that there's certain parts of Aiken County that have excellent perk. I would say 90% of Aiken County perks very, 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 very well. And if I tell you as your agent, look, I'm not concerned about this property perking, but if you know you're going to get into a bidding war, by all means, don't put in a contingency that's going to limit you. Because if you do, you're going to lose. And that's where people have to have faith and listen a little bit. If you're in an equestrian subdivision, for example, and you've got all these other properties around you that are on the same kind of sand clay soil that we see in most of Aiken County, you're not going to have trouble perking. That's an example. As far as well water being available, if there's an aquifer that goes under Aiken County that's excellent, and there's different aquifers that go under here, come off that main aquifer, you're not going to have a problem in Aiken County digging for a well. You may have a well that's got issues if you've got an existing well on the property, and those can be remedied. But bottom line, those are contingencies that initially you want to advise your client to look at. But, if there's other properties right around that all seem to have well and all have a good septic system available, we're not like Wisconsin or Illinois where you have that real hard clay dirt, and you may not have an area that's going to perk. When you're looking at an area of property that's on nice, sandy, well-drained soil, you're not going to have an issue with perking. If you're in an area that has aquifers underneath it, you're not going to have an issue getting a well. But, you have to follow your client's wishes, and you want to give them advice that's going to keep them protected. But by the same token, sometimes you have to be willing to take a little bit of a risk.
In my position as a buyer, Buck and I know, would not have been as confident pulling the trigger, making an offer, had I not done over a year's worth of research. That research included information about the community, about the economy, about the culture, but also about the geography, about the soil type, about the land, about environmental restrictions, water. And so, in my opinion, the more information you have, the better position you'll be in to make a decision when the time comes.
Absolutely.
If you have to make one fast. That's what it is. Do everything that you need to do so that you can make a quick decision. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. When something pops up, you got to be ready. You got to be able to hit it.
Exactly. And, I would say that it's difficult if you put challenges in front of yourself by not really knowing what you want to look for. In other words, as I told you, Helena, I asked all my buyers to do this. Give me a wish list and prioritize it. Tell me the 3 things that are the most important to you that you're looking for in your property. Those are the 3 things that I'm going to put at the top of your wish list. But also understand that there's no such thing as an absolutely perfect farm. You're going to have to do some things to some of these farms to make them perfect. The perfect place to move for most people is a place that meets enough of their requirements that they can patiently and slowly do the remaining improvements and be able to have something that's really special to them. Every now and then you'll get real lucky and you'll find something that's like an absolutely perfect fit, needs nothing, but that's rarity.
And you have to also be willing to accept the fact that there are going to be things about a property you're never going to change, and you'll have to live with it. I try to remind myself that things don't need to be perfect in order to be ideal, including horse properties.
Absolutely. The other thing that's really important as a buyer is to communicate with your agent. In other words, we're not mind readers. Like, for example, I had a client recently that ended up not working out to be the best client realtor relationship, because she needed someone that was really, really, really familiar with the school system here, because she had one child. And I'm not that familiar with the school system. I always tell my buyers, go to the school board, talk to other parents, because really, we don't want to steer you to one school district or anything else. We just need you to educate yourself in that factor. And I introduced you to another agent in my office who has kids her age, and that's who she's working with, which is great. But you got to tell us if something is really important to you, not bury it, then suddenly say, well, this is important to me. Speak to me. Tell me what you need, and tell me what things are most important to you. Like when I was working with you, Helene, I knew that the design and the functionality of the farm, because of what you do, was really, really important to you. And that's why I showed you the property that you ultimately bought, because it was very functional for your needs. It may not have been exactly what you wanted ultimately, but it's going to be when you're done.
It is going to be. And it's enough of a blank slate where we can make it whatever we want. I think it'll be fun. There's so much more to talk about, but we're out of time, and I know my listeners are going to have a ton of questions, well, for me and for you. So tell them where they can find more information about you if they have questions about horse properties or real estate in Aiken County. Tell us how folks can get in touch with you.
Well, you can Google me and get all that information. My website is findaikenhomesandfarms.com. And Barb Gould, USCUP. You can reach me at 803-295-3199. And my email address is listed on my website. I won't bore you with trying to spell all that out.
I'll be sure to post links to your website, your email address, and your phone number in this episode's show notes. So not to worry, listeners. And in case you've forgotten, this is episode 118. Barb, thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you are a very, very busy woman, especially this time of year. So thank you.
Well, Helena, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to your listeners. And if anyone wants to find me, I'd be delighted to help them. Have a great day.
Well, listeners, I hope you learned a little something from Barb. I learned a ton through this process. Buying a property when you don't live in the same town or the same state is not easy, so you do have to have someone you trust working on your behalf. If you have questions about my experience, please feel free to reach out to me. If it's going to take more than 2 minutes to answer, book an appointment. I can give you lots of advice, especially around the due diligence part, doing your research. I will post links and contact information for Barb at stallandstable.com. Just look for episode 116 show notes. Thank you once again to our sponsors, American Stalls and Barn Pros. You can find them online at americanstalls.com and barnpros.com. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it.